So behind me on this stage, we just witnessed G. Tom Mack and Tim Capello realising that they still have it here on the stage here in Manchester at For the Love of Horror. Up next, the Lost Boys reunion.
What you're about to witness has never been done before. This is a Lost Boys reunion. And some of the guys haven't been together since they made the movie 32 years ago. So, I'm not going to introduce them all by name. I'm just going to say, would you please welcome the Lost Boys and musical guests. Okay, you all seem very far away down there. I want to start the way the movie starts. I want to start with music. G, if you want to grab the mic. G, that's for you, yeah? That's for you. G.
Oh, me? Yeah. All right. I'm still performing. My body's not here.
We're going to be covering some of the ground that we've already covered, so apologies if I ask the same questions that I've asked some of you earlier. G, I wanted to ask about your involvement in the movie. You kick off the film, your music starts, this whole adventure, this whole journey. Just give us a taste of how you became involved in Lost Boys and how we've reached this point today with all of the guys.
Well, as I explained earlier, Joel Schumacher was filming the movie Lost Boys in Santa Cruz. And he was a fan of my music already and had gotten a hold of me through, and I'd met him actually. He came to one of my gigs back in the day. And through Warner Brothers, got a hold of me, and I had a chat with him. He called me at my house, my home in New York, and said, I'm doing this film called Lost Boys, and I'd love for you to write like an iconic theme song to it. And I said, well, when can I take a look at it? And he said, well, we're filming right now. But I thought to just send you a script and maybe you'll get some inspiration and some ideas, you know? Having no idea what this, he did say it was a vampire movie, and I said, okay, it's cool. But you know how vampire movies can go. But he sent me on the script, I read it. One night I remember him, I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was so much fun, but yet had a point of view. I was actually yeah, Jason, we were talking about it earlier, how it's not just a vampire movie. It's about finding family. It's about rebel without a cause factor, you know. And I love the idea that the movie doesn't start off with just the vampires being vampires. It took, 40 minutes, as Jason said, before you really started to see where things were going, which in the script was the same way too, and that's what I loved about it, because it had a great pacing. I don't want to keep going on here. But I remember the next morning getting up and going to my piano and getting an idea and then going over to my guitar, and within about an hour's time I started to get a vibe, and as things are in New York in the early 80s, it was very gothic and crack vials when you walked out of your apartment, and it was, there was a vibe in New York that kind of helped me get into writing the song. And by the time I got to my studio, it was written, having no idea what the film looked like, you know? And when I finished writing the song, did a demo of it, put some kids on it, tracked them a few times, sent it to Joel, and he calls me 3 or 4 days later and says, how did you know? This was incredible. I'm playing it on set. And I said, how did I know what? He said, this is amazing. I want to put this song everywhere in the movie. And I said, well, slow down, cowboy. It was one of those, can't put it everywhere in the movie. But I had not seen the film. And by the time I, so I went to LA after I'd done the final production, produced it, and it was just sheer synergy at its best, because when I started to see the film, I'm going like, I can't believe this film, because I had a whole different movie in my head. You know, when you read, it's like reading a book, you get a picture of what all the characters are. But it was just amazing, and I just started to just go down this road with Joel and help him placing the music in the film. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe how well it worked.
It works extremely well, and I think for those of us that saw G's live performance, I don't think we'll forget that one in a hurry. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Because we have so many guests, and because we have so many of you, I'm going to open it up straight to the audience. So if you have a question, and there's one at the back already, Ben will run with the mic. And off we go.
Hi. First, I want to say that I just really, really love this film, and it's holds a really special place in my heart as my favourite movie ever. And I think you've all aged beautifully, especially reunite.
I'll tell you later.
My question is for Alex. How does it feel to be able to play Bill S. Preston Esquire this year in
Well, I'd love to say it took many years of intense preparation to find the beloved numbskull that was lurking somewhere in my brain, but it didn't. We had a lot of fun. It was hard. It's a very physical movie, and we're old. And we're in pretty good shape, but we're still old. And we're playing opposite ourselves in many of the scenes, so it's kind of double labor. But I'm very, very proud of it. I think we've definitely made the best movie out of that script. And we had an amazing cast, we had an amazing director, and we brought a lot of people back. Say makeup effects guys came back. Guys who did Freaked, who did Bill and Ted 2, who did Lost Boys. A lot of those makeup effects people were on it. And other actors that were in the original. So we shall see. Next summer, we'll see what people think, but we had fun. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, this is for Tim. Tim, over here. What was it like to perform here in Manchester in front of all of us today?
I had such a ball watching. Thank you so much. And these pyrotechnics, they kind of gave me a clue that there was going to be something special. But they definitely surprised me with that one. And watching, you know, it's how much this movie means to so many people that I describe it as you look out, right, G? And people love this movie so much that when you're playing, everybody's got these huge, ugly smiles. You know when you're smiling too much and somebody takes a picture of you, go, oh shit, oh no. That's what we love to see, and we know that it couldn't have been anything but everybody on the stage and so many other people. So thank you so much. It makes my heart very, very happy.
My question is for Jameson, who forms 50% of the iconic duo, the Frog Brothers. Where is the inspiration drawn from for these two characters? Because there was times where the pair both so coming in with the lines and the one-liners, as we already all know. Where was that inspiration drawn from for them two characters? And was it their first vampire stakeout?
That's interesting. I mean, I think it was not our first, but it was our biggest, from the beginning. So I think, the inspiration for these
characters really, that's your question, right? Was that your question? So, like, okay, so originally when the script was written, I hear that it was more of like a Goonies, like a littler kids and stuff. And when Schumacher decided to make it into this little more mature, a little more intense, little darker movie, you know, the Frog Brothers, from the beginning, I didn't know for a while that this was funny, our stuff, because he was so intent on making us just this angry, like really intense crew. So Schumacher got us to be just really committed to being badasses. And I think that's where it came from. I mean, obviously Feldman and I had it in us to carry that out, but like Schumacher was like, you know, okay, so as an example, when we came to Santa Cruz, I got sick on the, we went on the Ferris wheel and I got sick because I get motion sickness. And Feldman was like, I'm gonna tell Joel. And I was like, don't you tell Joel that I got sick, you know. So we were just really trying to pull off this really tough thing, I think. That's where the inspiration comes from. Don't get me started. They were trying to get me to do a Christopher Walken impression, but I'm not, not yet. We got warming up a little bit. I thought it was really intense, you know. I really loved stepping into the role of these vampire hunters because it wasn't something I normally play. So I actually changed. I shape-shifted into these kids because I really was Christopher Walken, and I am again. And here we go. Sorry. Thanks, brother.
Hi, my question is for Alex, I'll go with it. I'm super excited. But I wanted to ask about you talking about returning characters, and obviously George Carlin passed away, Rufus. Is there going to be another way to fulfill that role? Obviously, you can never replace him. Or is it going to be some sort of homage?
Yeah, well, obviously, we talked a lot. The script was developed over some years with the two writers, Keanu and myself. And it was one of the first things we discussed when we were developing was what do we do with Rufus. And we decided pretty early on not to go into digital necrophilia land. So there is no posthumous George in the movie. It just didn't seem respectful. And especially of all people who put words into George Carlin's mouth, of all people, seemed like quadruply disrespectful. So we didn't do that. So we found a way to weave his character into the film. It's actually a fairly important part of the film, but it's due to his family members and other people that are around him, because the future plays a big part in this movie. So I don't want to give it all away, but we certainly address it head on, and it's something that kind of weaves through the whole story.
Just before I come back to you guys, I want to bring Chance in, and I want to reference something that Jason said earlier, that some of the teenagers were in their late teens, that they were relative newcomers to movies. Billy referenced this as well. You were 9 or 10 years old and you were already a veteran. And I want, in their terminology, and I wanted to ask you about almost being the older guy, you know, the older actor, having more experience than some of the older guys working on the film. Is that how you remember it?
That is not how I remember it. That was the first thing I ever did. But I think what maybe Billy was referring to is, for a 9-year-old, I think now that I look back that I have kids.
You were cool cat, and you had the vibe of a veteran.
Well, I look at my, I have a 11-year-old and a 7-year-old at home, and I look at them and I thought when she turned 10, I go, you know, I was your exact age when I was on the set, and I couldn't imagine her kind of doing what we were doing at that time, because it was really, it was so cool and we were super free. And I heard Billy talking about where Joel was kind of corralling everyone to keep everybody in check, so to speak. It's kind of how it was. So the veteran part, I think maybe was the old soul in me.
That may have been my interpretation of what they said to me.
Yeah.
Hello. Right down the front. Hello.
Yes.
I was actually just wondering if I could maybe hear from Jason. What it's like to come back together with as many members of the cast and the people that have been involved in this movie for the first time in 32 years, to have this many people on one stage and to be in the same building. How does that feel?
I mean, it's a little surreal, you know. I mean, as I said, you know, Jamie, the last time I saw him, I was 14 years old. I've seen Billy a little bit. I ran into Alex a while ago, but Tim and G, none of us have all been together. But it makes you look at your life and the circle that it becomes. And as I said earlier, the good thing about this sort of gypsy work that we do as actors is you make these very intense connections, have very intense experiences. They become part of you somewhat. And if you're lucky, you get to visit it again, and that's this situation. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
At the risk of being sappy, I will say that I mean, we haven't all been together. I haven't seen Chance since he was a little kid. And you, to Jason's point, you end up like a family, and then it all kind of breaks apart, and then you sort of go on with your life. I can't speak for everybody, but I can say that I can surmise that for many of us that made that film, it was a seminal period in all of our lives. It was somewhat to do with our age. You know, when you're of that age, a big summer like that is just going to be a big, memorable summer no matter what. But the experience of making the film, which has not been the case with me with every film I've done, was particularly communal, sort of the environment that Joel is famous for creating. Creates these very sort of family, communal sort of experiences. So it was a very potent experience in my youth. So I don't know, I felt kind of moved seeing you guys today, to be totally honest with you. It's like coming back to seeing family again, you know. I go into Warner Brothers lot today and I immediately think, oh shit, I remember like, you know, fetching with Jason about something in the back alley by a stage or whatever it is. And you know, we've all done other work since then. It just has a very heightened kind of place in my heart because of the potency of the experience. And we did also have a really good time. Joel knows how to make a set really fun. And sets can often not be fun. It can be very hard work and not glamorous and kind of drudgery. The Lost Boys was a shit ton of fun to make. So.
Come to the West End. Do you have any vague idea when and when's the best place to keep in touch with that news?
Well, if you know anything about musicals, and Jason knows a little bit about musicals and stage plays, we're actually ahead of the game. But I've worked on this thing for about. The concept came about 5-7 years ago, and then slowly I started. I didn't know if it really would work because first I studied musical theater, so I understand what does work. And vampires never really worked on the stage. Kind of a lot of them have flopped. Let's Start, things like that. I mean, brilliantly written by Elton John and what have you, but didn't work. So, but Lost Boys kept coming back and haunting me in a way where I thought, you know, this could be a musical, but I don't want to, fuck it up. I really want to maintain. You can't just copy the movie, you know, but you have to be true to the film at the same time. And I wanted to keep all those things in me that we did as actors and composers that got the film across and the story in the first place. So I was able to create a backstory. So what I'm saying here is these things are writes and rewrites and then songs. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. So to answer your question, I've been in London. I was in London for a month in summer for the West End version of it, and also in New York for the Broadway. They're both the same version. It's just different temperaments of how they work in England here and in America. Anyway, we're hoping for 2021, for the West End, and then we'll probably move in to New York about 6 months later. But there's a whole bunch. We go to La Jolla to do, you know where that is? It's in California. It's a place where we kind of try things out and see what's working. And yeah, but it's my producers are pretty incredible. They've been, you know, they've been very successful in plays like Wicked and this, that, and the other. And they've given me a lot of support because they believe in it. But these things take a while, and I like to say 2021, but you know, it could be a bit longer, but not much. But anyway, the soundtrack's out now, which was their idea because they believed in what it was, so you can stream it and do all that, as I mentioned earlier. Sorry for the longer that. But it's kind of hard to talk about when it is going to release, but just keep following and you'll know.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a question, so if that's okay. The legacy of the Lost Boys has endured, and even to today, we see films like Us, the Jordan Peele's Us, so a huge Lost Boys vibe. And has it surprised any of you guys really? I mean, Jason, Tim, James, and everyone, like, how do you feel about the legacy of the? Is it surprising that it's really not in other movies?
Well, you know, Joel Schumacher was always telling us on the set that we were making film history, right? You guys remember that? But he was sort of joking, like he wasn't totally serious, but maybe he was, and he saw it. I'm totally surprised, but not surprised at all then when I look at the movie, right? I mean, I watched it again like 10 years ago. I finally could see it without just like criticizing every little move I made, you know? And I was like, this is a good movie. So in that part, I'm not surprised.
The fact that it dealt with so many themes that were, you know, universal in the human condition of family, brotherhood, alienated youth, you know, the grandparents, the single motherhood, you know, all these things, they last on. It was an elevated horror film. It wasn't just a horror film. It had real story, and those kind of films, you know, can stand the test of time, which this does, because it was really quality filmmaking, from the cinematography to the screenplay to the costume designing to the music. I mean, it had all the elements, so it doesn't surprise me after, you know, seeing the film that it still works today, you know.
Good question.
Can I ask the actors who played the vampires a fairly basic question? I'm always full of admiration for actors and what you do, because I can't do it. Most of us can't do it. In this movie, you were called upon not just to act, but you also had all the special effects and visual effects, the fangs and the teeth. It's a very basic question, but how the hell did you cope doing the job with all of the... Because I understand that the contact lenses were very difficult and you couldn't wear them very long. Can we have an answer on that?
Yeah.
Well, I can't speak for Billy and Alex, because I wasn't in vampire getup as much as they were, nor hanging upside down with the glass, you know, contacts in. But the one thing that I had the most trouble with was we actually had to go to a nail salon and get real nails, like acrylic nails put on. They weren't Lee press-ons that you took off every night. And so as a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, very active skateboarding young kid, have these on for however long we were filming, that was kind of a pain in the ass. But the eyes did hurt, and I think I know where Alex is going with this, the contact.
Yeah, I mean, the makeup in Lost Boys was actually really minor. It was Greg Canham, who was a genius, came up with this. We had a long shoot, but we didn't have a luxurious shoot, and Joel needed us to get in and out of the makeup quickly. So Greg was tasked with coming up with a look for the vampires that would be extremely quick to apply and take off. So the makeup was actually far less intense than it's been on other projects even that I've done. by a long shot. It was a very simple forehead appliance and teeth and contacts, and that was pretty much it. The problem was in the old days, which is when we shot this movie in prehistoric times, contact lenses were basically, it was like a half a ping pong ball that had been cut off and painted and then just jammed into your eyeball. It was very hard and very dry. And so for my death scene, like I landed in a pile of dirt and then had like Jameson and Corey and like kicking dirt into my eyes, like shoveling it with their feet, like literally shoveling it in my feet until I was like in an ambulance going to a hospital because they had scratched my cornea. It was good times.
I also think he did minimalize the makeup, but I also think they went through many trials, and the aesthetic of the full-on was too much. He wanted us still to look semi-human.
Totally.
Because some of the other trials we were looking real beastly.
That's right. I forgot about that. With our regular look was pretty far out, and then it all got pulled back. That's right. I forgot.
Okay, audience, Ben. Yeah.
Hi there. I just want to know, there's so many iconic performances and characters in the movie. I just want to know, if you could go back in time and have the opportunity to play a different character, what would that be and why? Who would that be?
Probably Nanook, I would say. Or maybe Billy, because he got the most ladies. No, it's interesting when you say that because, I mean, and they touched on it, it's one of the rare movies that every single little component matters, because if they were gone, it wouldn't be the movie. If that dog wasn't in there, it's really not the movie. If, Chance isn't that little boy that barely has any dialogue, it's not the same movie. I mean, it's called The Lost Boys, but Billy and Brooke and Alex, they barely have any dialogue, yet they're who you remember because of their presence. So every single little aspect of that movie, from the music and an iconic scene that Tim does, if you removed any one bit, and you can't say that about a lot of movies, if you remove one bit from this movie, it is not the same movie. And so there's something very unique about that, and I think that's one of the reasons that it holds up today and has that kind of place.
And without the comedy between you and Corey, it wouldn't be the movie.
There's no, I mean, obviously, there's no, Corey. It doesn't work. And then, Jamie and, Feldman created these little characters that if someone did that today, that would be a franchise. I mean, and they did that without that thought. So, so I had to play the Michael guy, so that was that, the word there.
I would have been Nanook if I could go back. I would have been Nanook.
I wanted to just follow up on what Jason said because we haven't really talked about the Frog Brothers. I was saying earlier that the film has some humour in it, but none of it is played for giggles. But there's a goofiness there with you guys, but it's never overplayed. And there's a very fine balance between going too far. And I wonder whether, briefly, you could tell us something about how you guys worked it between you as a tag team, as a chemistry.
Cool, yeah. So, first of all, Joel, we've talked a little bit about Joel Schumacher and how he had such a strong vision. And it was the same thing with the Frog Brothers. There were times where, as I started to understand that it was comedic, that I might have, I was like maybe tried to push it, and he was right there. He was right there to pull us right back and being, deadly serious. And also I got to hand it to Feldman that, Feldman, he takes a lot of heat for being kind of nuts, I mean, and he is, we all are, I mean, in certain ways. But when we work together, and it happens today too, actually, because we do various little videos and various little things, together. And he's really good to work together. I mean, maybe it's just us. I don't know how other actors feel about Feldman, but we had this really good chemistry together that was very much about Feldman and I being very generous with each other, but it was also about Schumacher from day one getting us to hang out together, me and Feldman and Haim, while everybody else was off shooting, you know, these night scenes and everything. We were just hanging out at the hotel, and we were just building up that chemistry, and I think that's probably a lot of it.
Hi! I just wanted to say how much I love the film. I was only about 5 or 6 when it came out, but I grew up with it and absolutely love it. And I just wondered if any of you wanted to share some of your favourite memories or funny moments from making the movie.
Well, I can share you a real moment that, looking back, is kind of funny. So I had my one big scene in the movie was when I came out of the bed, right? So leading up to that, I had no clue sort of what it was. It's pretty simplistic, the idea that it was just an air compressor under a bed with a hole cut in it, maybe some confetti and some bed things, and it came out. Well, we did the scene, and I wouldn't go back in. I became petrified. I don't know what happened. I couldn't go back in. I was crying. And so they put Larry, who was a fantastic stunt double, in. He did probably 4 or 5 takes. And to this day, it's still, you know, that moment I look back and I laugh at it now, but that was a very real moment. I was scared shitless, to be quite frank. No, it's funny now, because I look back, I go, it's just an air compressor. What was I doing? But that was a real moment, so I'll share that with you.
Hi, how you doing? As you guys probably know, Santa Cruz every year they show the movie on the beach. I was just wondering, do you guys have any ever stuck along just to reminisce and sat on the beach and watched it, or are there any plans for maybe on down the line having a reunion there, taking on the stage, ripping things up?
I just played Santa Cruz. I don't know, at 64, I just decided I was going to do the first tour that I ever did under my own name. So I toured around the States all summer. And I had to go to Santa Cruz. And I just want to say that there's an element to the Lost Boys that I've always felt. So going back after 32 years, haven't been there since. I pictured the writer of The Lost Boys just going through and spending a day or two in Santa Cruz. And that movie, if you were a really creative, great writer, would just come to you because that town is that town. That town is a character in that movie. And when you go, it's such a still, hippie, slacker, stoner town, and they're doing their very best to gentrify Santa Cruz right now. And I gotta tell you guys, it ain't gonna happen.
I'll tell you my experience in Santa Cruz, and I'd never even been there really, and it was about 3 or 4 years ago they asked me to come up and perform on the beach before they watched the film. So I went up and I did, of course, Cry Little Sister. Just me and an acoustic guitar, but the sound guy had it really well hooked up. I mean, and there was like 6,000 people on the beach getting ready to watch the movie, and it was bloody well cold. And freezing, and this is summer. I'm going, this is what it's like in Santa Cruz in June. And, but it was a great experience in that watching a full-on audience, and I'm not telling you a word of a lie, it was like 6,000 people on the beach watching the film. And after I performed, and that went great, and what have you, and then I stood at the back up on one of the railings and watched the audience watch the movie, and that was a trip. Because here we are in the very place where the film was made. Santa Carla. And yeah, it was a trip.
Obviously, we're here for the Lost Boys. You're Michael and you're incredible. One of my favourite films you've ever done was Narc with Joe Carnahan. It's absolutely sensational performance. And I don't know whether you're a method actor or you look to for influences, but did you take a particular... What was your take on Michael? Where did you get him from? Was it inspired by other vampires? Was it inspired by something else you'd seen? Or was it just winging it?
For Michael? I mean, in this movie?
Yes, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I told Joel, you know, early on when he kept trying to get me to do the movie that I didn't want to make a vampire movie. So we talked about what about making a movie about a boy whose parents got divorced, didn't want to take the role of his father, all of a sudden got pulled into something, his sexual awakening. As I said, I used the vampire aspect as a drug analogy. And someone who got pulled into something because he felt nothing. And I felt if we did that, then it was universal. And if we did that, people could relate to it on a human level. And anyone who got into the genre aspect, that would also work. And so I absolutely approached it that way. So when he started, after having that blood, it was really just substance, and substance taking over your body, and desire taking over your body, much like someone who's addicted to something.
Yeah. I just want to add one thing about Jason's performance, if I can, which is that, you know, I was a New Yorker, and I got the script, it was super cool, and I auditioned a few times, and I rode motorcycles, like, this is gonna be badass, this is gonna be fun. And I remember getting to the shoot and meeting Jason for the first time and talking about his characterization and like how he was coming at the role. And I was like, oh shit, this is like a serious movie. But in a good way. And then it was like, and then there's Diane Weiss, and then there's Bernard Hughes, and then there's this incredible Ed Herman cast that Joel had built. And it was a bit of a shock to the system because I didn't have much preparation in terms of thinking about concepting the film in my head that way before I actually got there. But I remember being so grateful that sort of the lead actor in the movie was anchoring it in such coming at it in such a grounded way. And it elevated all of our game, I felt like.
One thing I want to add also on that is that I feel like, we were talking about, why the film has endured. And I think that that's part of it is because the people at the top of it, the people at the top of the credits, who had the lead roles, really that you guys it wasn't just a vampire movie, you carried it because it was, you took it all the way. You took it all the way action-wise, you and Kiefer and Corey, and it was, and I think that that's a big part of it is that it grounded this movie in a way that we don't always get with a movie that's also got all these other, through other elements.
We are running out of time, and I'm very sorry about that. We've spoken about some of the other actors who are no longer with us, but we haven't really said very much about the actor who's coming here tomorrow for a few hours as our flying visit, Mr. Kiefer Sutherland. I hate to ask you what was it like working with, but he's such a key component to the film. He's a great villain, and like Jason, he brings maturity to his performance, which was beyond his years. To any one of you, to all of you, do you want to say something about Kiefer Sutherland?
I didn't realize that Jason was 19. I think, how old was Kiefer? 19. I can't believe you guys were such professionals and real actors. I mean, I was like lost. I was a lost boy. But to see you guys and what you were, your presence and your depth, and I can't believe it. I mean, you guys, were the real thing. And like you said, they anchored the dramatic narrative. And I had what I could handle, and I guess, that's just how it goes. But it's taken me 30 years to even feel comfortable on a set in front of a camera, and you guys had it back then. But you know, Kiefer was amazing. He had an innocence about him, but he also, was seasoned. He'd done Stand By Me, and he's a great actor, and but he was also, fully committed. But he was also a kid too. I mean, he looked up to Brooke and I in some ways, and then there was some kind of nice innocence about him. But at the same time, the guy had deep chops. And Jason.
I want to add something about Kiefer, which is that, so I didn't see Kiefer that much on set because our scenes didn't really align, but there's two things I remember. One is that the scene on the beach where he bites that guy's head, I saw him pitching that idea to the director or to the sci-fi, to the special effects guy. And as I think back on that, and what a cool moment that was, he was like, that bald guy, I want to bite his head. So, to his credit. And then also, when like a few months later, we were doing looping, redubbing some scenes that the sound wasn't right on. And I got to see the scene where like he was grabbing Corey Haim's foot in the cave, and then he burns his hand, and a tear comes out, and I was like, oh, this is amazing, like this guy is amazing. So that's what I want to add about Kiefer.
I have to jump in there for 1 minute as we praise Kiefer. I have to speak for Kiefer. That moment you're talking about, which is amazing and seems so emotional, if he was sitting here today, he would say his eyes were watering from the contact lens, and they caught it at the exact moment. And he loves it. He's got the credit for that, but he says total accident and bad contact lens.
I just wanted to say one thing about writing the theme song, and this applies to both Kiefer and Jason. When I was reading the script, the inspiration, I had no idea, I didn't even know who the actors were. And the biggest fear was, I hope these actors have a vibe about them in this trilogy with Star. Having no idea, and I didn't know Joel didn't tell me who was in the film. And once I got with him in LA, and I was so bloody nervous. I remember the opening scene of the film had my voice, he wanted from the get-go. I said, take my voice out, just leave it to choir. And everybody looked at me, my manager, are you committing artist suicide? What are you doing here? I said, no, man. Those choir voices is what needs to go over that water, not me. But as we got into the film a bit deeper, I was watching Jason's moves, just as an actor, and I'm going, thank God this guy has got this, it's that thing. I wrote this song around these characters that you read, but Jason so had the fucking vibe. And then when I started to see where Kiefer was at, and the rest of the boys, but it was meant, I was really writing around Kiefer, Jason, and of course, Jamie Gertz, Star. And and each step of the way, I'm going, it was one of those things, you just hope the song worked against the characters. And it just gave me shivers watching you guys perform and knowing that there was a thematic thing going on here that was really working. I want to say one thing about this guy. Did he kill it today? Tim Capella? I'll tell you a wild story. Really quickly, we met in New York before Lost Boys in a studio. We used to pass each other. It was in Long Island City, remember that? And then he went on to do Tina's stuff, and anyway. But that's what I wanted to say about Jason and Kiefer and how an incredible, the inspiration got even that much deeper with Cry Little Sister as the film got into it a bit more.
Thank you. Hi guys. I just want to say, because I've got a lot of love for the vampire genre, and your footprint in this genre is incredible. Like, if you look at the makeup and the hand setting on fire, if that did inspire Buffy, what the hell? There's lots going on there that you guys you've really made a mark in a genre that is not only really, really old and ancient and myth-based,
has moved into such a vital part in our media. And I was wondering, did you guys notice at the time that this was like going to be a huge joining part of the legacy? Or did you think it was just going to be something that was going to be a really good film, but wasn't going to affect the vampire genre that much?
I don't know if I thought about it, but when you were talking, I was just thinking about the vampire movies that came after us. And my dear friend Brooke, who we all love and miss, and I'm not sure, but I think he made this button. I think it was his phrase, but he made a button that said, "Real vampires don't fucking glitter." And I never saw that movie where the vampires glitter, but I got another story to say about that film. What was it called? Twilight. So Robert Pattinson, when we did my first con at Milton Keynes, what? Yeah, Robert Pattinson came up to us, because he was there for Harry Potter, and he came up to us and he was a fan of the movie, and we signed, I think, autographs. You know, everybody signs for the other actors, and he really was a fan, and then later he went on to do Twilight, but it's just a funny story. But Brooke was, the best, and if you got to meet him, you loved him, and I know you loved his performance, but we miss him, and we miss Corey, we miss Ed, we miss Bernard Hughes, but, too.
Okay, we know that vampires are timeless, but unfortunately we are out of time. Get on your feet, make some noise. Thank you to our guests.